Tom Wills wrote a famous letter to the paper suggesting the formation of a football club or a rifle club, because this is an era when the military ethos was still very, very powerful.
To the editor of Bell's Life, Sir, now that cricket has been put aside for some months to come, and cricketers have assumed somewhat of the chrysalis nature, for only a time 'tis true, but at length will again burst forth in all their varied hues, rather than allow the state of torpor to creep over them and stifle their supple limbs. Why can they not, I say, form a football club and form a committee of 3 or 4 to draw up a code of laws?
He had the idea that it was necessary to have a game that cricketers could play in the winter to keep fit, and so the early days of Australian rules football came into existence.
And he remembered the games he played with the Aboriginals, and he devised a game, and his cousin, a gentleman named Harrison, helped him, worked with him, and they devised a set of rules that had a running game, and a game that would require a lot of skill that would get the interest of young fellows to try and keep them fit. And that game was something that just took off like wildfire.
The influence I think he had was to modify what were a set of rules into a very fast-flowing sport, take away the offside line, and all of a sudden you've got a quite different game.
If you look at the people who put the rules together, there was one Irishman, there was an Englishman, there was an Australian, and there was Tom Wills. So you had a real mismatch of people and thoughts and ideas of how the game should evolve.
I think it's very difficult and unfair to the others who were involved in the beginning of the codification of the game to ignore their efforts. I think Hammersley did a lot. I think Colton Harrison did a lot. But I think Tom was unquestionably the spark.
The first known written rules of Australian rules football, or what was to become Australian rules football, were penned. The first name on those rules is Tom Wills. That's no accident.
I find it most difficult to countenance the idea that the players should hold the ball in their hands. But I will, however, bow to my fellow committeemen in the interest of codifying this manly game.
The brutal practice of hacking at an opponent's shins will not be tolerated in Victoria. Men here in the colonies cannot afford the loss of income that will doubtless ensue from weeks of convalescing with broken limbs. There is no skill in hacking, and it should have no place in our game.
The game as played in England is an unskilled affair, amounting to little more than a constant maul. It is uninspiring to play and uninteresting to watch. I think the ground should be free for all, so that the captain may disperse his forces in any position.
10 simple rules that even a thick-necked Irishman can follow.
Well, to a game of our own.
It was during this period, with the foundation of clubs like Melbourne, East Melbourne, various football clubs that were established to play the game. And they played on the parkland around the Melbourne Cricket Ground. And in fact, that very early game represented 40 boys from Melbourne Grammar and 40 boys from Scotch College, with Tom Wills and another gentleman acting as umpires.
The participants had a great time playing the game, especially when the first goal was scored. Words to the effect of great were the cheers that rang out amongst the gum trees and the she oaks. Given it had taken more than 3 hours, it's no surprise they were pretty happy that they'd finally scored a goal. So this was a case of rules being made up during the course of the game.
He was, first of all, the first captain of the Melbourne Football Club, and their finest captain. He was the first person to employ a series of small kicks from the back line to the forward line. Now these days we just think that's common. A fullback kicks out, a short pass, another short pass, a short pass, until the ball can be secured safely to the forward line where someone close to goal can take a shot at goal. Nonsense. It was described in the first couple of years after the beginnings of this new code of football. Tom Wills was the captain.